A very, very good evening, distinguished members of SP Abuja section. You're welcome to our monthly technical meeting for the month of March. We kindly appeal that you share this link to your friends, your colleagues, so they can join and take advantage of this monthly technical meeting. Thank you. Thank you. Of course, the theme for today's meeting is regulatory regime for wholesale operations. And we are so pleased to have an expert in this niche. Of course, he's a mechanical engineer from the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, the NMDPRA engineer, Okechukwu Nwankwo. Very warm afternoon to you, sir. Confirm you can hear me, sir.
Loud and clear. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Awesome, awesome. Nice to have you here, sir. So, ladies and gentlemen, please, we kindly appeal that you share the link to all of your colleagues on the different social media platforms we have so that we can kickstart the event. However, for those that may join late, this event is live streamed on YouTube. And of course, our past technical events is also live streamed on YouTube. So definitely, you can always pay a visit to SP Abuja section on YouTube and watch all of the events there. Let me continue by showing you the screen, which is the order of events. Of course, after my brief introduction, I'll have the safety brief, and then I'll introduce a few of our guests on the call, and then we have a welcome remark by the section chair. Move to reading the biography of the speaker, and then we have the technical lecture for about 30 minutes. After the technical lecture, we'll have the opportunity to ask the speaker some questions for 10 minutes, and then we switch over to a closing remark, and then networking. It's going to be a very brief and engaging technical session. Let me continue the event by giving us a safety brief. I kindly appeal that please, if you're not speaking, you leave your microphone on mute. We also appeal that if you raise your hands, should you want to speak, and of course, you'll be given the permission to speak. During the question and answer segment, you can use Q in front of the questions, and of course, the speaker will take your questions, or you have a comment during his lecture, you just have to use a C and drop the comment, and of course, he would attend to your comments during his lectures. Please ensure you can still hear the fire alarm with your headset. If you're using the headset, we are alert and aware of the environment, and we appeal that you stay safe. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to continue the event by recognizing some of our leaders on the call. We're pleased to say that we have the section chairman of SP Abuja section, Engineer Ikechukwu Okafor, on the call. Engineer Ikechukwu Okafor, confirm you can hear me, sir.
I can hear you loud and clear. Good evening, everyone. Why we having so few people in this meeting?
Yeah. Actually, we have over 40 registered people, and the mails have been sent to them over and over. So I don't know if the topic is scaring them, but we are still sending invites, and we hope they will attend, sir. Still on the... Pardon?
Go ahead, share this even on the student group. They need to be in here. They have a lot to learn from you.
Okay, let me remind them again because the students are, let me just remind them. Okay, thank you so much, Section Chair. Of course, would keep inviting all of them. We also have on the call our programs chair. Please help me welcome Professor Kafayat Adeyemi on the call. Confirm you can hear me, ma'am.
I can hear you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome.
A warm welcome to you, ma'am. We also have the programs chair 2 on the call, Dr. Yetunde Aladitan. A warm welcome to you, ma'am, and welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, ma'am. We also have on the call the publicity chairman of SP Abuja section, Mr. Odafe Atebe. One welcome to you, sir. Nice to have you here, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ofofonono. Well done. Good
Thank you, sir.
Everyone. Yeah.
Yes, and of course, the speaker, once again, Engineer Okechukwu Nwankwo, mechanical engineer at the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority. A warm welcome to you, Engineer Okechukwu Nwankwo. We also have several other members of SP Abuja, senior members, student members. We say welcome. I'll continue the events by welcoming our section chair, our leader, for his welcome remarks. Please help me welcome Dr. Ikechukwu Okafor for his remarks. Section chair, sir, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Please confirm I can be heard.
Very well, sir.
Good evening, everyone. I want to say a big welcome to everyone of us for joining the monthly technical meeting. You would agree with me that the monthly technical meeting, ever since we started this board year, has been held consistently, and it has had a conversation that are diversified as they are critical and as they speak to what we stand for, the value we stand to share, the value we wish to imbibe across the section, the value of sharing technical knowledge, the value of ensuring that our people, our members, are kept abreast of what's happening in the oil and gas and in the energy space. And today, we want to have another of that monthly technical meeting. I've always been of the opinion that we must have our regulators speaking to us. We must have them sharing the knowledge of what they do. And this multi-technical meeting couldn't have come at a better time. And so I want to thank the speaker, my friend and my brother, Okechukwu Nwankwo, for availing himself and giving us that opportunity to hear him speak from his wealth of knowledge and experience. I've heard him speak before, and it's my interest too that when he spoke about the PIA at the time, he was quite passionate, as it was deep and as it was illuminating. So Okechukwu Nwankwo is someone I'll probably want to listen to. And so permit me to welcome everyone. I saw the council chair get in a moment ago. To welcome everyone, the council chair, the board members of SP Abuja section, and everyone on this call. Welcome to the March monthly technical meeting, and I hope you have a huge take home and you enjoy everything that we have on offer. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you to our leader, the section chairman, for that very brief and insightful welcome remarks. We also celebrate our council chair who has joined. We celebrate you, ma'am. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, please, we kindly appeal that you continue to share the link to your friends, to your colleagues, because we are, of course, going to enjoy this lecture today. Of course, on the screen is the synopsis for today's event. The session explores the regulatory framework governing wholesale supply operations, focusing on compliance, licensing, enforcement, and market stability. It will examine how regulation shapes supply chains across industries, particularly in the energy, petroleum, and essential commodities. Of course, to take us on this very crucial topic is the mechanical engineer at the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, the NMDPRA. Engineer Okechukwu Nwankwo currently works as a mechanical engineer in the Engineering and Standards Department of the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Regulatory Authority, the NMDPRA, with more than a decade of experience in the fast-paced oil and gas industry and previous experiences in the academia and manufacturing. Okechukwu has developed his skill in policy development, designing regulatory frameworks for efficiency and simplification of application process requirements. He is part of NMDPR's PIA Transition Committee, Regulating, Drafting Committee, etc. His in-depth awareness of regulation and operational efficiencies has been critical in building organizational success, development of regulations, guidelines, and various working tools for the NMDPRA. His role requires a combination of technical expertise and imaginative thinking to help NMDPRA in implementing its PIA mandates, which specifically created the midstream petroleum industry as novel and distinct in Nigeria. Okechukwu has dedication to excellence, driving change and simplification of regulatory requirements for business development. Please help me welcome Engineer Okechukwu Nwankwo, who will be taking us for the very next 30 minutes. Kindly ensure to keep your questions on the chat box because you have 10 minutes to ask him questions. Sir, the stage is yours for 30 minutes.
For your team members, for your team leaders, or those that
Thank you very much for the introduction. I want to use this opportunity to specifically thank the council chair, Madam Amina, who is also my boss, other senior members of SPE, Dr. Ikechukwu Okafor, the program chair, my senior colleague, Mr. Dafe Atebe. I want to use this opportunity to say thank you for this invitation. You know, I've had the privilege of speaking before with respect to the PIA, which Dr. Ikechukwu noted, but there have been a lot of other developments. As we know, the PIA is quite a new document that people, you know, in the course of implementation, we keep learning every day. In the course of the implementation, we keep learning and keep implementing and keep improving. So what I want to speak today is on one of the new licenses that didn't used to exist before in the previous regulatory regime, which is the wholesale supply license as prescribed by the PIA. I'm going to speak about the advantages, the importance, and some of the things entailed in getting the license and all the things the license is expected to do for the petroleum industry. I'll want to start my slide by first drawing our attention to comparison between where we were before, which is the Petroleum Act of 1969, and then the Petroleum Industry Act of 2021. These are like 60 years apart. I want to draw our attention to the major key difference between both acts, you know, which is essentially related to energy security. If you look at the definition of upstream operation in the previous act, which we all know was developed as at 1969, where we mostly have IOCs in the country, if you had an oil mining lease as at then, it gave you the power to win, to work, to carry away, to store, to transport, to export, and otherwise treat the petroleum discovered. And I've put the reference. And then if you had a downstream license, which the Act referred to as a marketing license, it gave you the power to import, store, distribute, and any petroleum products. The key thing to draw out of this is that there is no connection between this upstream and then the downstream. The refineries that were mentioned in the Act, there was no direct correlation on how they were going to get petroleum feedstock into those refineries. And you can attribute this act to the reason why when most people talk about Nigeria being a producer of petroleum, of crude oil, and at the same time being an importer of petroleum products, because the act was designed for us to export all the things we have produced in Nigeria without necessarily guaranteeing domestic energy security or feedstock to any refinery established in Nigeria. And then on the other hand, they turned around to say you can also import petroleum products. But the PIA now came to break that power that was previously granted to an upstream person to export or trade in petroleum without necessarily guaranteeing this energy resource. By, as we know, creation of two distinct regulators and separation of the industry. So the hitherto powers that we are vested on upstream lessees, we are broken into two. So while the windwalk carry away rest in upstream, the store, transport, exports, and otherwise treat petroleum was now transferred to the midstream. So what that does is that the PIA, just to summarize this slide, the PIA is emphasizing that we must first guarantee energy security in addition to providing for exports. So in essence, there's a framework, and we're still going to talk about that, for any refinery or processing plant established in Nigeria to get adequate feedstock to make petroleum products without necessarily relying on imports. For those of us that have studied the PIA a little bit, you will see that the PIA only permits for imports only when there is shortfall of supply, which is almost at the end of the PIA, because the framework under which the PIA has developed the value chain is expected to guarantee this energy security for Nigeria. So I'll move to the next slide to also discuss part of the ways the PIA tried to do this. It was through separation of operations, and the PIA required for every operation you need to do, you are required to get the specific license. If I trace from the previous slide, you will discover that in the past, for me to engage in upstream petroleum operations, I might be required to also provide a pipeline that will transport my crude oil or gas. I might be required to do my own processing facility. I might be required to construct my own terminals, and in some cases, I might also be required to distribute. But the PIA has broken down these operations in order to encourage more participation and possibly even create more jobs. So each of these on this slide, require specific licenses to carry out those operations. And also stemming from the previous slide, there's a point of handshake where the PIA expects the whatever crude oil that has been produced to be transferred to the midstream for this, either through the transportation line or through processing or through the supply, which I'm still going to explain further in the next slide. So these are the distinct handshake that the PIA has provided, and there are also very specific functions that the option regulator is expected to carry out within the midstream. But just to summarize this slide, what this slide is essentially saying is that the PIA mandates separation of operations, and is also in line with, if we realized before, if a company is being established, they hire drivers, maybe your core business is to maybe do regulation, if I can use NMDPR as an example. And then you are required to hire drivers, hire chef, hire cleaners. But for more efficiency, what companies have realized is they focus on their core mandate, and other people can come and render those services. So it's that type of framework that the PIA has provided with this separation of licenses. So just to introduce the wholesale supply license proper, the wholesale supply license is actually the appropriate license to engage in the sales of petroleum or for exports. For anybody who is exporting or trading on petroleum without this wholesale supply license, is actually undertaking illegal operations. And I also want to draw attention to some of the changes the Act has also brought in terms of setting definitions. If you look at petroleum products, some of the things we used to call gas before, the PIA has actually classified it as petroleum products. You talk about LPG, you talk about propane, you talk about butane. Those things were previously referred to as gas, but if you look at the definitions of the PIA, they are all called petroleum products. We also look at petroleum liquids. So some of the things we also call crude oil, which is a blend of crude oil, condensate, plant condensate and all that. The Act also refers to it as petroleum liquid. And when you hear the PIA talk about natural gas, it's actually referring to the gas that pass through the pipeline. I just felt to also highlight these definitions. So in terms of the wholesale supply licenses, there are two that the Act has prescribed. The first is the wholesale gas supply license. This is the license that enables you to take this gas that have been produced upstream and then to deliver it on the through the pipeline or through the network, which I'm still going to explain further in the next slide. And then the next one is the petroleum liquid supply license, which enables you to supply any other thing that is not gas through the network or through the pipeline. So if I'm exporting, like I said, a blend of crude oil and all this, you require a petroleum liquid supply license. If I'm exporting or selling LPG, you require a petroleum liquid supply license. And that is how the PIA has designed it. I think this slide should have come before the previous one, but let me just explain this. So after the PIA has mandated for this separation of operation between upstream, midstream, and downstream, it has also provided rules in terms of combination of these licenses. So I've just done some few examples, which I am highlighting on my slide. So can a upstream producer also engage in domestic sale of gas or petroleum liquid? The PIA says yes. But however, the person will need a petroleum mining lease and this wholesale supply license. Can an upstream person engage in crude refining and processing or gas processing? The PIA says that's a no-no, because by the PIA, it also wants to maintain certain level of transparency between where the resources are produced, and I'm still going to give that example very well, and then where the resources are being processed. So in that way, there's a bit of accountability across the value chain so that someone does not handle the hydrocarbon resource end to end. So that collaboration is supposed to provide a bit of transparency and accountability. So can you do processing and supply? The PIA says yes. Can you do upstream and downstream? The PIA says no. You must register a separate entity. Can you do gas aggregation and any other license? The PIA says no. Once you obtain a gas aggregation license from the NMDPRA, you are not permitted to own any other type of license according to the PIA, because this gas aggregation license, apart from the fact that the PIA wants this license to be phased out within the shortest period of time, the gas aggregation license only license is also expected to run on non-profit. And then can you do supply and open access operations? The PIA also says no to that. So and all this is to bring in more participation, which is expected to create jobs within the country and all that. So let me quickly draw a difference, because currently in the industry, I'm aware that most people confuse the role of a producer upstream and then the role of a supplier, which I've tried to elaborate on a little bit. But just to put it in a very simple term, in the way we can understand, the PIA is essentially saying that the process of production is different from the process of taking that whatever you have produced to the market to sell. So just imagine I'm a farmer for a little bit and I've produced cassava in my farm. The PIA is saying that he doesn't want, or let me put it correctly, that the act of producing that cassava is different from the act of taking that cassava to the market for it to be sold or for it to be exported, right? So the act of producing that cassava is upstream operations, and the act of taking that cassava from the farm to the market, which I'm still going to explain a little bit better, is what this wholesale supply person does. In contrast to the Petroleum Act, which we are comparing with, in the Petroleum Act, the same person that produces is also expected to take it to the market to sell. But meanwhile, the PIA does not foreclose or prevent an upstream person from going to the market to also sell what you have produced. However, you need to also obtain this wholesale supply license, and you may need to access the midstream facilities as a third party, because ordinarily you are not expected to own those facilities in the midstream. So what do you require to be an upstream producer? You just require a petroleum mining lease. And I know this is issued by our sister agency, the NUPRC. What do you require to be a wholesale supplier? You need a wholesale gas supply license or petroleum liquid supply license to take whatever has been produced upstream to the market or for export. So this is the power the petroleum mining lease grants you. It gives you the power to produce and then transfer whatever you have produced into the midstream, while the wholesale supply licenses are the ones that give you the powers to actually sell and deliver what you have produced. The other ones are the qualified person. So for you to be a qualified person for the upstream producer, it means you have a petroleum mining lease from the NUPRC. And the qualified persons for this wholesale supply license is essentially anybody, including the lessees. How do you sell in upstream? Because people usually ask that question. Is by the principle of transfer pricing. Maybe some of us who are economists might know this principle. Between you and the supplier, or through the gas aggregated price with the gas aggregator. Well, how do you sell with your wholesale supply license? Is on a willing buyer, willing seller transaction with wholesale customers, subject to regulations by the authority, the NMDPRA. So let me quickly run us through the benefits of this wholesale supply license to the industry, which I know not many people are aware of and not many people know. The first is that it provides, if you listen to my explanation, it provides a clear delineation between your role as an upstream person and your role in the midstream. So if as an upstream person, you don't intend to participate at all in the midstream, the law permits you to get different suppliers to supply whatever you have produced upstream and then make maximum return. We are aware that some of our producers produce as little as maybe 1,000 barrels, 5,000 barrels. That quantity may not necessarily warrant you to start looking for markets. And even some of them even want for those products to be exported. So it can be producing 5,000 barrels and maybe you are looking for an export market, but with a wholesale supplier, he can gather those volumes and be the one to look for where your production will be sold. And in that way, you can make maximum and also focus. Like I said, PI emphasizes on focus on what we are competent on doing. We also speak to the optimization of assets within the midstream. So what this PIA has done with this wholesale supply licenses, all midstream facilities are operating on tariff base. So the wholesale suppliers are the people who are expected to use what they have gotten to maximize this product. If I explain what I mean by tariff base a little, it's like where you go to maybe grind beans or tomato and all that. The people do not necessarily own what you are going to put into their facilities, but they just produce and you pay them. They just help you process it or transport it as the case may be, and you just pay them for their services. The PI is also an alternative. The wholesale supply license as an alternative to the gas aggregator function. Part of the things the industry has been complaining about is the regulated price of gas and the pathway which the PIA has provided for us to exit from regulated price of gas in Nigeria in order for us to fully develop is through this wholesale supply license. And I can explain how. So if I'm a wholesale customer, a power plant and the rest, and I'm looking for gas, my two alternative is either go to a wholesale supplier and then do a willing buyer, willing seller basis, or through the gas aggregator. I think this presentation is not to fully explain this, but I've at least thrown some light to it. I've also spoken to domestic energy security, which this provides for. Like I said, part of the things the PIA emphasized on is, unlike the Petroleum Act of 1969, is that power where someone who has produced hydrocarbon has not guaranteed that refineries in the country or gas processing facilities in the country has gotten enough and is being exported. So what the PIA has done is through the domestic obligation ensures that this power to enforce domestic obligation are splitted between the two regulators. So while the Nigerian upstream is expected to assign these producers the obligation as the case may be, it is the mandate of the NMDPRA to enforce this obligation at the point of export. So the way it's supposed to work is at that point of export, NMDPRA will look out for what is your obligation. So if your obligation is to meet these certain requirements within Nigeria, you are supposed to satisfy that prior to engaging in export. So it also has provided from streamlined accountability. So like I said, if you really want to focus on upstream, the PIA has provided you for that avenue to do that. You don't need to bother about the pipeline that is going to come into your facility, the processing. You just be doing your upstream activities and making maximum revenue from it. And I've also emphasized on this, on the issue of transparency. So while the upstream is accounting for how hydrocarbon is being produced, the midstream through this wholesale supply license establishes how it was used. And the difference is the transparency. So if our sister agency, the NUPRC, reports that 3 million barrels of crude or condensate or natural gas has been produced, it is actually the mandate of the NMDPRA to report how each molecule of this hydrocarbon has been used. And if there's any difference, that can be attributed to non-transparency and accountability. I think I didn't even list all the advantages here, because also the MDGIF, which is meant to bridge the gas infrastructure, also comes from this wholesale supply, because it's a transaction between the wholesale supplier and the customer that gives MDGIF 0.5 revenue, which the money is meant to bridge gas infrastructure in the country, and a lot of other advantages, which I can possibly answer during the question and answer session. So what do you need to become a wholesale supplier? There are many requirements there are some requirements the PIA has stipulated in section 111, but these are the 4 key elements the NMDPRA will want to see. First, you have to have a hydrocarbon feedstock. And where are the possible places you can get hydrocarbon? Like I said, you can get hydrocarbon from a lease, you can get from a processing facility. So it can also get from a refinery in terms of product, and then from a third party. So the next one is, as a supplier, how do you intend to take what you have gotten from the hydrocarbon source to the customer? You can do that through a pipeline, through a processing facility, through a storage facility, and all that. Those are the things that are the means of getting it to the customer. And as we have said, the PIA provides that you can get these facilities by either doing a third party or open access with somebody who has this facility, or having your own if you don't have an upstream facility or upstream license. We also want to see your metering philosophy, and the last one are the wholesale customers which you want to deliver it to. Here, I've done a simple schematics of what this wholesale supply license entails. And like the previous example I gave, I said it's like taking something from the farm and taking it to the market. And in taking it from the farm to the market, you are going to use it. Let me see whether I can put my pointer on. So these lines represent pipelines. You might take it through a pipeline. And like I said, the PIA provides that this pipeline will be on a tariff basis. So multiple people can use this pipeline in order to deliver to this customer, because what everybody is targeting is this market, who is the customer. There's also the gas processing facility that may come in between. And this gas processing facility is also established on a tariff basis. You use it with your pipeline and then deliver it to the customer. So if I use my previous example, the wholesale supplier has bought cassava from a farm. He has taken it, maybe what the customer requires is Gary. He has taken it to the processing facility, process the cassava into Gary, take the Gary to the wholesale customer, who can also be outside the country in terms of exports. The other products which may come out of the Gary, I don't know how to process Gary, so I don't know. Another wholesale supplier can also take it to other different markets where all those things are required. So this wholesale supply role is quite important in terms of harmonizing the industry. I think I've done this before in terms of highlighting those who are qualified to get this wholesale supply license. And I say this everybody, including upstream producers who intend to deliver this hydrocarbon by themselves. So who are the customers? The customers are wholesale customers of the strategic sector, which are like our power plants, our gas to commercial, and then gas-based industry, those of them that make fertilizers and the rest. We talk about the gas distributors. These are those that take gas from the wholesale suppliers and then begin to distribute it in bits to other customers who use gas in smaller quantities, the CNG providers and any other person on the network. And then you talk about those on the petrol liquid side, you are speaking to the refiners and our what we used to refer to as marketers, petroleum products distributors. So this is a more detailed form of what I just explained earlier in terms of the simple diagram. It's essentially taking it from the farm, like I explained, to deliver it to this group of people who are the customers. And then they end up paying tariffs across this value chain in order to ensure that we deliver more value. So what are the duties of the suppliers? Number one is to maintain reliable supply. So for instance, if you look at how the PIA has established a refinery, he has established a refinery as a wholesale customer of crude oil. So meaning that if you establish a refinery in Nigeria, you don't have to look for crude oil by yourself. A wholesale supplier of crude oil is mandated to maintain reliable supply of crude oil to that refinery. However, the PI also provides that the refiner may also be the wholesale supplier by himself to deliver that crude to himself. Or maybe if there is now shortage, the NMDPRA can work with NUPRC on the domestic obligation to guarantee that that refinery in operation gets the required crude that they require. We also speak to remittance of levies, which I've said is related to gas infrastructure in Nigeria and improving gas infrastructure in Nigeria and other duties. So let me quickly also talk about the wholesale prices and wholesale levy, which comes to the MDGIF and authority fund. So the PIA also establishes that the relationship between the supplier and the customer is a bilateral transaction. So the supplier is expected, like I said earlier, to reliably deliver hydrocarbon to the wholesale customer, while the customer now pays wholesale price in return for the services of the supplier. And out of that wholesale price, the supplier is expected to remit 0.5 of that wholesale price to the authority fund and then MDGIF. Because these are statutory funds. It's like paying somebody's salary without remitting the person's pension. So any person who sells gas in Nigeria, what this is saying is any person who sells gas in Nigeria or who sells petroleum products in Nigeria without ensuring that these monies get to the statutory funds, which is the authority fund and the MDGIF, is actually in violation of the law, and that his transaction is incomplete. So let me round up. I'm rounding up already by also highlighting, the specific licenses the PIA has prescribed for upstream and that of midstream and downstream. So in upstream, it has provided for those that lead to production of hydrocarbon. While under gas, these are the gas processing license that I explained. It gives you power to operate a gas processing facility and then earn tariff in return. The only one that permits you to sell to wholesale customers are the wholesale supply license. And I have the same for petroleum liquids. I think when they share the slides, you can read this because I've outlined it in details. Thank you very much, and I'll be ready to answer questions.
Thank you, Engineer Nwankwo, for that very, very elaborate lecture. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to ask questions. I would like to see some virtual applause for Engineer Nwankwo. Please, you can drop some chats celebrating his exceptional session. And please, if you have questions, you're please permitted to ask your questions now. Or if you have comments, you're also permitted to ask comments, to drop comments. Okay, thank you, Council Chairman, Engineer Madami. I see your comments. Thank you for the very educative and insightful lecture. Professor Kafayat, I see your hands there. So no comments, no questions. For 30 minutes, he has given us a very, 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 very interesting lecture. And I was expecting we'll have one or two questions for the regulators, that's the NMDPRA. If you have questions, please drop them. Please drop them. Please drop them. I see everybody just celebrating him. It doesn't mean we all understand what was being. Do you understand? Okay, I guess that's a yes. Okay, I'm still checking out for questions. There's no questions, so wow. Okay, somebody has raised his hands up. Okay, please. Chizom Okoye,
Can I
please
ask
speak.
a question? Yeah, good evening. I like to start by saying thank you to Mr. Nwankwo for this excellent presentation. It clears out a whole lot of gray areas around whether the new act is going to help the industry prosper or not. But I have some very few questions. Firstly, because I like to follow the money, I like to ask, what do you think would be the result of enacting this act and following it fully? Then secondly, are there provisions for arbitrations in this act? And most importantly, the funds of levies, are they used also training of in the first instance, training of regulators in the industry and then of younger people who are coming up? Or is the fund management not well stated in how it would be used? And is that a possible area that can be improved upon? Sorry, those are my 3 comments.
I can go ahead and answer, right?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much for the question you've asked. So I think your first question is related to effectiveness of the implementation, if I can summarize that. So yes, the PIA, like we know, the problem we have with the PIA, in my own opinion, is that we practiced the Petroleum Act of 1969 for so long. So even sometimes the experience you get in the industry, even those that are retired and those that are called in terms of trying to get professional experience, always advocate the position of the Petroleum Act of 1969. Nobody has really, in my honest opinion, bothered to really understand how this act intends to impact, or some of the changes it's bringing to impact this country. So for instance, when I give example of how it guarantees a reliable feedstock to anybody who establishes in Nigeria, what it means is that any refinery that establishes in Nigeria based on the framework of the PIA is expected to get, and that would have attracted more, or would attract more investors. Same on gas and same on all that. So the second one, in terms of arbitration, I know we have a regulation in respect to arbitration. Honestly, I'm not too conversant with that, but if you go to our website, you are going to see that in terms of, I've forgotten what they call it, we have it, and the NUPRC also has it. And, part of the role of the regulator is also to arbitrate, prior to escalation if the parties may wish to do so. So in terms of funds on this act, to be honest, the MDGIF, the authority fund, and all that have the acts listed specifically what is going to be used for. However, there is this provision of the Act in Section 111, which has not been fully explored, in my best opinion, which provides that for anybody who is issued license, I think somebody can look up the Act, Section 111, and it's also in Section 79 for upstream. And then Section 111, I think subsection either two, I think it's two for midstream, is expected to have detailed programs for recruitment, training, professional development, and all that, which the regulators monitor, internship and all that. So that is part of requirement for being issued a license. I hope I answered the questions exhaustively.
Just confirm you understand the response, right? Okay, he's muted. Okay, Professor Kafayat, please go ahead with your question, please.
Okay, thank you, presenter, for a detailed presentation. You did break it down very well. During your presentation, you made mention that one of the benefits of the PIA is that it provides for domestic energy security. And so my question is very basic. Sometimes we still experience queues and all of that. So between NUPRC and NMDPRA, where is the gap, or what exactly is happening? Thank you.
Okay, so if I may answer that question, like I said in my previous answer, we did Petroleum Act for so long, 1969, and honestly, the relics still exist, even as we try to implement PIA 4 years into it, right? As I explained that, you can trace that fuel queues if they are there, with respect to the fact that previously Nigeria is expected by law to import petroleum products and then export crude oil. That is what is written in law. But however, the PIA has come, created a distinct midstream in order to bridge that gap, to ensure that we actually deliver to ourselves first and before exporting. So based on that, as we are aware, different refineries has been springing up in Nigeria. And by the time most of them are fully in operation, I know that the queues will disappear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we are done with all of the questions for today. Once again, thank you so much, Engineer Okechukwu Nwankwo, for the time you took to brief us on this topic. You can stop sharing your screen, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, of course, you were listening to a technical session organized by SP Abuja, and the theme was regulatory regime for wholesale supply operations. Of course, we continue the event with announcing that you should be a member of SPE if you're not already a member. We have the opportunity for student memberships, opportunity for professional memberships, and of course, to be a member for Abuja section, it costs 86,500 naira. And then for those that are already members, renewal is 69,500. If you don't renew before 31st of December, before January 1st of the next year, you are expected to pay a restatement fee of 17,000 naira. So please, if your membership is not active, you kindly appeal that you reach out to our membership chair, Dr. Ogolo, with the number you see on your screen, so as to get registered. The account number is also on the screen. Take a screenshot, make the payment, and send a screenshot of the proof of payment to Engineer Ogolo. And of course, he would help reinstate your membership. All of our videos, this one and past events, is live on a YouTube channel, SP Abuja section. We're also very active on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, now X, and of course, send us an email at spabuja@gmail.com. And of course, we'll be so pleased to respond to you in 24 hours. We also like to announce that SP Abuja will be hosting the SPE Africa Annual Students Congress. The theme is building the energy workforce of tomorrow. It's going to happen live at Bayero University, Kano, from the 3rd to the 5th of April 2025, 8 a.m. daily. We kindly appeal that you join us as we mentor students over there at BUK. Of course, we also have an event after the STSA, which is the Oloibri Lecture Series and Energy Forum. Of course, this lecture today was on supply chain excellence, and Olef would also be speaking on driving energy sustainability through technology, policy, and most importantly, supply chain excellence. The date is 10th of April, 2025 at PTDF Main Auditorium here in Abuja, 9 a.m. So please mark your calendars, 1st, 3rd to 5th of April, 2nd, 10th April, and of course, it will be a pleasure to have you at both events. We'll see you guys immediately by welcoming our program's chair, Professor Kafayat Adeyemi, for her closing remark. Prof. Ma, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Afam, and good evening once again. Yeah, I would like to use this opportunity to thank the presenter, our engineer from NMDPRA, for keeping to time, as well as giving us a detailed explanation of the Petroleum Act 1969 versus PIA 2021. He took his time to break it down to everyone's level, and I'm sure we all picked what he was trying to, the explanations he was trying to give. And I also want to thank him for accepting to be our speaker for the month of March. And to the organizers, the programs committee, the section chair, thank you so much for your leadership, and to all board members, and for every participant that have joined, a big thank you for coming on board, and see you in the next month's MTN. Thank you, and a very good evening to everyone.
Thank you, ma'am. Ladies and gentlemen, please, for social media, kindly turn on your video cameras. Let's take a quick screenshot. Kindly turn on the video cameras, please. Thank you. Kindly turn on your video cameras, please. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Shout out to our publicity chair. Thank you so much, sir, for being part of this event. Thank you so much, sir. Please turn on your video cameras. Thank you. We kindly appeal that you turn on your video cameras. Okay. Okay. So when I say SPE, you're going to respond with clean energy. We have about 21 people on the call, but we have just 8 people turning on their cameras. Can you please turn on your video cameras, ladies and gentlemen, please? Please, you appeal, you turn on your cameras, please. Thank you. Okay, so when I say SPE, you respond with cleaner energy with your thumbs up. And of course, we take a screenshot. A thumbs up when I say SPE, you say cleaner energy. SPE.
Cleaner energy.
Oh, are you not hearing me? Or is the energy low? Or are we tired from work? What's happening? When I say SPE, respond with clean energy. I need the energy. SPE.
Clean energy.
Energy. Clean energy.
Clean energy.
Clean energy.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we call it a day.
Bye-bye.
Won't we network with our office mates again? Engineers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, please, network, please.
SP Chairman, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, engineer. How are you?
Good afternoon, ma.
Good
Thank God.
afternoon. Okay.
Yes,
Do you
ma.
know, my husband was listening to you. He was like, "My is good." I said, "It's my PA now." That you were very concise. You know, it's
We are
very
learning
rare
from
for him to
you.
compliment you, so he must have done something well.
We are learning from you, man.
Well done. Well